What's good? I'm Mark Lee Morrison, and this is a special bonus episode of Low Profile from the Ruinous Media Network and KAOS 89.3 in Olympia. Today, I'm speaking with the author, filmmaker, and visual artist, James Spooner. In 2002, James released his first feature-length documentary, Afro Punk, which highlighted the experience of black folks in the punk scene. The film sparked a movement of live events, zines, and eventually a festival that James is no longer associated with. And in 2022, he released his first book, a graphic novel called The High Desert. I read it, and I was so blown away that I sought him out as soon as I finished reading. And eventually, we wound up setting up a live interview after a screening of Afro Punk at the Capitol Theater here in Olympia. Like myself, James grew up in the Mojave Desert, but he also spent some time living in Seattle. This was his first visit to Olympia, as he explains.
Obviously, I'm familiar with a Rockstar K, like the whole legacy of Olympia, but I just I was too young to really come down here. You know, I didn't have a car or anything.
Right, yeah. You living with your mom at that point?
No, I was 19, but
Gotcha.
I never left Capitol Hill, basically.
Right. Busing, walking, biking,
exactly.
etc. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's pretty remarkable this film is 20 years old. Mm-hmm. So you were just a kid when you made it, pretty much.
Yeah, I was 25 when it came out.
At what point did you realize you were making a documentary? Like before it happened? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so basically in the year 2000, I was 23 and I basically had one of my many identity crises around race that I had throughout my life. I think just being biracial, living amongst white people, it was just, they happened every so often. But this particular one, I couldn't shake. So I decided to go to St. Lucia, where my family's from, try to get back to my roots or whatever. And upon going there, I realized that I didn't really have a whole lot in common with them either. I felt like a foreigner and whatever.
Right.
So coming back, I had a lot of anger in me. You know, I was still part of a white rock and roll scene. And I just felt like somebody should have said something, I've been vegan since I was 16. I was well versed in feminism. I was an ally for gay and lesbian community.
You were putting in the work.
I was I was preaching these politics, but the conversation around race was usually limited to Nazi punks fuck off.
Right, yeah.
Which is great.
That's an easy one.
Yes.
Should be.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
But also what are we doing on the other days? Mm-hmm. And those were the questions that would really affect me. So I started having conversations with the other kids of color that I was connected to and seeing if they were kind of having those same questions or how they dealt with them. And at the time I was a sculptor and I just kind of realized I need to make some art around this and a sculpture just isn't going to do it.
Right.
So I just kind of led with that DIY mentality, the same one that let me start a band or have a record label or put on shows with no experience, which was I'm just going to make a movie, So it was, intentional from the beginning.
So it seems like there must have been a number of road trips or just kind of destination shoots.
To reach all these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first step was I got to get an email address, I got to get it's the year 2000, it was still being with dial up. I had to get a computer. I had to learn how to edit, So,
right,
and all of this stuff is expensive. So I had to do it in steps, So I got a computer so that I could get on the internet. What is this thing, the internet, and find people, there was no social media. So how do you find people,
So you waited till 21st century to get email?
Yeah, I didn't have email till 2001.
Wow.
So I I had no use for it. Like, you know, um, you need to get something to somebody quick, you fax it, right? Like you go to the post office or whatever, like the copy shop, you fax it. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't go to college or anything, so I just never had an app opportunity. So I got a computer. I was like surfing the web, you know, punkplanet.com. Like they have a message board, you know, and I could like go on there and just be like, hey, like name all the black punks you can think of. Like, who's the black punk in your town? You know, oh, Black Chuck. Oh, I got to find that Chuck, you know?
Yeah.
So I just started like kind of compiling a list of people, trying to reach out, emailing people, like just trying to figure out who would make good protagonists, who would be people that would just be interesting to interview. And once I got together enough names, locations, by that point I had paid off the computer, I maxed out my credit card again, and I bought a camera. And then I had a benefit show that I raised, I don't know, like $1,000 or something, so I could rent a car and then go to them.
Just you?
Tamar Colley actually went with me. The woman, one of the protagonists, the woman with the shaved head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we met and we just kind of like clicked. She was going through a tough time at the moment. And I was like, I'm about to hit the road. You want to come with me? And we just drove around and, you know, spent a month. We interviewed 33 people in 28 days.
Wow.
But then there's like 80 people in the film. So throughout the 2 years that I was editing, I was also interviewing and plopping them in, you know.
Layer it on.
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
Yeah. Until at one point I was like, all right, I can't do anymore. You know, like I gotta cut it off at one point.
Up to a point. Are you still in touch with many of these folks?
Yeah. Like Tamar and Mo, the two of the protagonists, are like some of my closest friends. And a lot of the people who like I call the chorus, like are people who I still, they're friends, they're people I work with on different, you know, on other projects. Like the film has fostered a much larger community that I'm still very connected to.
Just in case it's helpful to lay out what you mean by the chorus. I really like your use of that.
Oh, just kind of like the 80 people who are in the film that aren't the 4 people we keep seeing over and over again, you know, or like that we don't see their lives, you know?
Yeah. Your book, The High Desert, that is in essence sort of the prequel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if, you know, a lot of people, I've had the comment that, you know, Afropunk film doesn't have me in it, you know?
Right.
Like you only hear my voice one time at the very end when I asked about naming bands. Yeah. And that was done very purposefully. I think at the time I watched a lot of documentaries and I didn't like when you would hear voices from behind the camera, you know? So I tried my best to avoid that. But if you know me, the story arc of the film very much is my story, you know?
Right.
So I am present. And, you know, for any film lovers out there, especially documentarians, like nothing is completely unbiased. You know, the director has a direction, you know?
Yeah, always.
But The High Desert is specifically a memoir about my first year finding punk. I lived in a small desert town in Southern California. I was one of 2 Black kids in that little town, same town apparently that you grew up in.
Yeah, right down the street. Yeah.
And which is remarkable. It's like nobody is from there.
I feel like that region, the high desert in California, does kind of breed strangeness in people. It breeds otherness for people who don't feel like they belong in that
I mean, it's definitely
landscape.
A place where if you are othered, you should really leave.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're bound for trouble, which basically this book kind of covers that first year, you know, the experiences of being Black in a town where like Nazis are just very like comfortable being, you know?
Yeah, they're like chilling.
Yeah, I mean, and when I was in middle school, like kids would just have swastikas written on their like Trapper Keeper, and like nobody said anything, you know? So it, you know, it kind of just focuses on like answering the question, what is punk really about? you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very much about me. But I've found that, the story translates, and I think the more personal you get, the more it's relatable it is somehow.
Definitely. I think everybody can probably find something to, latch on to and see eye to eye with, but also it's really eye opening to get your unique perspective. I also really like it when books have a soundtrack, and you did a great job of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't want to jump ahead too quick, but there is a new book on the horizon, Black Punk Now, which you're the editor, so it's you're shaping the story here with other voices.
So myself and my co-editor Chris Terry, who's also a Black Punk author, the two of us put together this anthology of Black Punk writers and comics creators. And so this book, Black Punk Now, I mean, it's fiction, it's nonfiction, it's like comics, it's horror, it's fantasy. There's interviews. It's really trying to give like a whole like spectrum of Black punk stories told from the perspective of Black punk writers.
Yeah, and you're using, like you're saying, pretty much every print medium possible.
Yeah, there's a script in there. Like
the script was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like that one too. Yeah,
that's a good inclusion.
So
no spreadsheets.
No spreadsheets. But I included a comic in it, and I also like did all the illustrations. So there's like 60 illustrations in it.
Yeah, there's a Olympia reference in the comic too that you drew. There's a Bikini Kill lyric that shows up.
Yeah, I have my comic is about raising a Black punk daughter, and I have all these cells of her being little and these little punk moments where I'm like so proud. Like the one that you reference is when she first learned how to roller skate. She was like 5, 4, and she on her own was singing
Rebel Girl.
Yeah, she's the queen of as she's roller skating. It's like a very like Now she's in middle school, and Black kids are saying like she's whitewashed. So it's like really hoping that this generation doesn't have to deal with the stuff. I want to live in a world where people are looking at this as like, oh, that's how it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But unfortunately, 20 years later, people are still saying like, yeah, that's my story too.
What in the film are you still, you've seen it a million times. What's the part that really gets you?
Well, I feel like, I still get a little like misty in the end when they start talking about like why punk is so important to them. Mm-hmm. Gingy Brown does such a good job. He was the singer of Absolution. He's the one with the gap in his teeth, and he's like among a bunch of keyboard and stuff. And he just does such a good job of like talking about, kids asking questions. And when kids ask those questions, we need to listen, that whole section just keeps me, I still get emotional, I really love the part where Mo from Cypher is like, talking about writing music for Black people, but then he's like playing to all of these white kids in a bowling alley. It's like, those moments are just like, wow, that was like pretty good filmmaking.
It's really powerful when he's, talking about like, okay, you guys are all singing these words, but it's not meant for you. Yeah. Like this is, it's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. But, it's also fun just to be like, 20 years later and know where these people have gone. And, like Tamar Kali is like a very successful composer. She's done soundtracks or scores for like Academy Award winning or nominated films. Mo is the national director of the Working Families Party, and he's a founding member of Black Lives Matter. So it's like these really, it's fun to see my friends grow up and like apply punk to their adult lives.
Yeah, still making big moves.
Yeah. And I think that that's a message that like now as a 40-something-year-old punk rocker that I want to be able to say like, yeah, those ideals we had when we were kids, like we can apply them to our lives now, even if it's to like open up like a vegan donut shop or whatever, what I'm saying? It's just like these things that we learned back then that we can still use. It's basically just like, how do I live without screwing people over? And that's kind of like the questions we were asking ourselves when we were 15 listening to Crass or something,
Right, yeah. You had a punk band at one point yourself.
I mean, it's not really worth mentioning, but
sorry then. Well, I mean, you figured out early on that wasn't the area that you were going to be putting yourself to work in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I was 14, 15, 16, like I really wanted to be on stage. I really wanted to like, command a crowd. I really wanted to like, I don't know that I had anything to say, but I just wanted to say it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I'm like, I can play bass, but it's like doing math. Doesn't come natural. It's very like calculated. And
yeah, you got to work it out first.
And like my voice is terrible. So it's just like, that wasn't in the cards for me, But when I was 17, I started a zine and I would go to shows and, sell copies of the zines and patches, and eventually like had a record label and put on shows. And I saw that like, that was the first time where I felt empowered, like, oh, like we're in this space and it's all these kids. There's not even any adults here. We like put this show together and like really had a language for community and, how to think the economics of it all and the need for cooperation over competition and all of this stuff. Just like that stuff was set the course for my entire life.
So I'm guessing when you had your own merch table, basically you had patches, zines, a label. Is that after you left the desert? Is that when you're in New York?
Yeah, I was in the desert until I left when I was just turned 15. So I still had 3 years of high school left.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was none of that. There wasn't even really any shows in the desert. So I didn't know like that a merch table is something that existed.
This show, I love that your book opens in a metal show at a church, like with a Christian metal band. That's literally the only kind of shows I ever saw growing up there.
Yeah, it was definitely like you took what you got.
Yeah, but everybody showed up for it. Is what it looked like in the book. Can you? I haven't heard you talk about your label. How long did that last?
Yeah,
Can you like who was on that?
So the biggest release was the Swing Kids 7-inch, which was like free Locust. If anybody knows that band.
Yeah, I know the Locust.
So I knew the pre band from that was Struggle, who I was just an incredible hardcore band, very political, and really like flipped my brain. And I wrote them a letter, just like 16 years old, like, you guys rule, kind of thing. And they wrote me back, and it really just became this like, oh, like these are just people, like.
Yeah.
And I ended up like, this is like a really funny story. Like the bass player, Justin, who was singer of Locust, he was the bass player of Struggle. He just wrote me back and said, thanks, blah, blah, blah. Here's a free 7-inch, whatever, if you're ever in San Diego, look us up. And I'm telling you, 3 weeks later, I was on a Greyhound bus to San Diego, and I just showed up at his door.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And he just let me in. I stayed at his house for 2 weeks.
What?
And it was just like a punk house with 6 people in a 3-bedroom,
Oh, that's wild.
But in that time, it's like I learned, like one of those kids had a record label, and, like I kind of just, oh, this is just something you can do.
Yeah.
you know? So,
What was it called?
my record label was called Kidney Room Records, which was like some vegan reference from, I think it was from Animal Liberation or something. I don't remember. But, so I put out Swing Kids. I put out a band called Frail. Another one called Elements of Need, which, like, I guess the claim to fame on them was Eric Wareheim, the comedian.
Yeah.
He was the guitar player in Elements of Need. So,
Oh, wow. So there's that connection.
yeah, so, random fun facts, But so I just put out like a few 7-inches,
Cool.
Yeah. His experience. It got to a point where it was like big enough where I needed help. And I was like, do I want to have a business or do I want to be a kid? So I just was like, I just want to be a kid. So I just gave the rights back to all the bands, like the masters or whatever, and walked away from it.
How did you find tattooing to be a profession?
Oh, so I'm a tattooer. That was after Afropunk. I moved to Los Angeles and I kind of was trying to make it in Hollywood, and I'm going to pitch meetings and doing all this bullshit.
Yeah.
And it just didn't really vibe with me. So I think in 2008, when the recession hit, I was working this production job. Everyone got laid off. I was into cycling and I met this kid at the bike co-op who was a black punk and he knew about Afropunk and he turned out to be a tattooer. So he was like, hey, I asked him kind of naively, will you teach me to tattoo? And just on the strength of the film, he was like, all right,
Word.
And, it was just that permission that kind of got me in the door. But it's a tough industry to really break into, not very inviting.
Right. You still got a chair someplace? Or?
Yeah. I still tattoo once a week in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
If anyone's down in LA, maybe.
Yeah. I might have to. I have a pizza that I got 14 years ago that still doesn't have any toppings. And that's it. So
put the mushrooms on there for you.
Yeah. That's the first goal there. I spoke with you in one of my classes at Evergreen last fall, and at that point you were talking about a follow-up, a novel that's prose.
Oh, sure.
That's further biographical, kind of picking up where the High Desert story left off.
Yeah, thanks. You just let me pitch everything here, aren't you?
I just want to celebrate the body of work that is James Spooner here.
Thank you. So I have a book that's tentatively called Name 3 Songs, and it is prose mixed with illustrations, and it's coming out in 2025 with Pantheon. So it's comics, illustrations, flyers, and prose, just general novel writing. The actual story is basically my Afropunk story. So it starts in my teen years, learning up all of the things that we just talked about, DIY, and learning these ethics and morals, and then having the experience of having anger in my early 20s, wanting to really tell these white punks who they are, celebrate, eventually being able to celebrate the POC punk experience, and making the film. We didn't talk about it, but Afropunk then became a series of concerts, and then that led to the Afropunk Festival, which was a DIY venture for the first 4 years, and then there were a number of corporate compromises that had to be made that I couldn't deal with, but those compromises fly right in the face of all the politics, all the ethics and morals that I learned.
It smells kind of like Coachella or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and if you know anything about Afropunk today, you Google it, it's, now it's an R&B festival.
Pretty much.
But it's, 100,000 people go to it. You know, it's fine for what it is. Like, I don't have like super strong anger anymore, because it's like I take it for face value. It's a corporate festival that a bunch of Black people go to and have a good time, and I can't get mad at that, you know. But you know, the journey for that happening is kind of an interesting one. And then what's even more interesting, or the thing that really excites me, is the reaction from the underground. So the kind of silver lining, happy ending of the experience of having like Afropunk capitalized away from me, gentrified away from the community that built it.
Yeah.
Is that so many punk kids, like, it's been around, the festival's been around for 14, 15 years now. So many punk kids grew up hearing about Afropunk. They went and were so like disillusioned with what it had turned out to be that they went home and made their own festival.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what it takes.
Yeah. So me realizing that, like, oh, punks are nothing if they're not saying fuck you to something. Mm-hmm. You know? So I had to give them something to say fuck you to, you know? And then in return, I got what I wanted, you know? So that's kind of the story arc of that book that I'm writing.
I wanted to bring up, just because I thought it was a cool sub story that tied into yours, that's in the Black Punk now, but the Sister Girl Riot.
Oh, sure. So there was a moment in New York where many of the people who were in the film, Tamar Kali, the one who shaves her head, Honey Child, she's the one who had like a blue afro and said she might shave it off and whatever. There was a woman, Maya, who was right next to her, and this other woman, Simi. So the four of them are all in bands. They are the leader of the band. They write the music. In most of the cases, the name of the band is their name. And they did a series of events they called the Sister Girl Riots, which were basically the four of them performing and really kind of putting a spotlight on Black female musicianship, you know, and I think just in the name also giving a critique of the like whiteness of Riot Girl, you know, a critique that most old Riot Girls are very familiar with and, you know, have, I think, tried to reconcile ever since. But yeah, so they did a bunch of those, and it's kind of taken on a bit of a, you know, a lore that a lot of people still talk about.
Yeah, it's just like a magic moment in time.
Yeah, it's, where you know, it's like, I don't know, like No Wave or something, just like that thing that happened in New York that people talk about, you know?
Yeah.
I was proud to be part of the last one, which was part of the first Afropunk Fest. And Kimya Dawson was also part of that on that show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she was still living out that way.
Yeah.
Word. Another little connection here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, does anyone here have any specific questions for Mr. Spooner? What's your name, friend?
I'm Dean. So I've been punk for a very long time. Indigenous, it's kind of, I don't have a choice. But like being punk is all about rebelling. What are some of the like small acts of rebellion you do to just make it allow yourself to live comfortably, like live the person you want to be?
That's a good question. Small acts of rebellion. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm just going to start talking and maybe something will come out. Like, I mean, I've maintained the politics that I grew up with. You know, I'm still vegan. I have 2 daughters that I like raised to be part of, not necessarily part, I mean, I don't want to force the music on them. One has discovered it and the other one is 9, so she still likes Beyonce. But like, it's, you know, giving them the tools and encouraging them like to find their own voice. I mean, I feel like I live fairly uncompromised. You know, for me, becoming a tattoo artist was was liberating because it was the first time that I was able to make money, but also like I'm just drawing on people, so I don't feel like I'm doing harm. You know, I mean, granted, I'm hurting people as I do it, but that's their choice. You know, and even with that, like I was the first vegan tattoo artist in California. You know, so I have kind of I introduced that to Los Angeles. You know, so I don't know. I'm sure I could come up with better things, but you know,
Yeah, you're good.
I still turn my American flag stamps upside down.
That's very small. So that's right with it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody else? Yeah, please. All right, and your name?
Jude.
Jude.
My name is Jude. In your book, The High Desert, you grew up desert area. You have like one other friend, right?
I mean, there was a circle of friends, but there was one black kid.
Well, yeah, I kind of had a similar experience. I grew up in Chelan, which is like high desert, Washington.
Oh, sure.
White people everywhere, only like 2 black people in that entire small town. And I kind of had a friend like that, introduced me to punk, and it was just the 2 of us, there, only punk kids there. What happened to your other friend? Like, where are you still in touch with them? Like, what do you, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like I said earlier, the kids, when you're different and you're there, it's best to get out. And the kids who left turned out pretty good. The kids who stayed got into drugs. They got into, they got pregnant right after high school. All the kids I knew in high school who stayed, almost all of them had serious drug problems or have them still. There's nothing going on. So, why not do meth? It's unfortunate. One thing about the book is that it's small town USA. So, it can really be anywhere in the United States that's not like the cities. And, if you're a weirdo by, in however you define that, like, that's just not a place to be, and there's a lot of pain that comes along with that. You couple that with poverty and it's a bad recipe. So, not very many of them fared well.
Do we have any more from the audience? Kelsey?
I was curious about, and I was trying to remember her name, the girl in the movie that was making the calendar.
Yeah, Mariko.
Yeah. Where's Mariko now?
That's a good question. I think that it's fair to say that she wasn't thrilled about the way she ended up seeing herself, I ran into her once or twice after the film came out, and it was real awkward. I've looked her up, on Facebook or whatever. She still seems like she's somehow involved in event promotion. She looked happy in the pictures. I don't have she's one person that I haven't stayed in touch with, and she is somebody who I always will defend. If you read my book, I think that you'll see that in a lot of ways I was like her when I was 14 and, living amongst all these white kids. It's just like this desire to make your life make sense in their world, The thing that's most comfortable to white people, if I say to white people race doesn't matter, that's like, whew, I don't have to think about it then, And I think that the punk scene of the 80s and 90s was very, the people of color within it didn't typically make that their focus, which made it comfortable for the majority of the people involved, So I knew that I was looking for her when I was making the film. I knew that she would exist, or I didn't know if it would be, I didn't know the gender of the person, but I knew that this person would exist. And I wanted to represent that aspect of the scene and that aspect of like the experience, more is a better word. So, so I always defend her. And even while we were making the movie, or while I was interviewing her, I would like totally break the interview rules and like turn off the camera and be like, "Are you sure you want to be saying this?" Um, and so I did the best to give an honest portrayal, even though there's a lot of cringy parts, a lot of cringy things, and I hope that seeing herself as like, oh, like, I hope there's growth,
She seemed like she was struggling.
Yeah.
And she seemed like that was kind of a self-preservation technique that she was using to just kind of like exist in the world. And I was very intrigued by her. So
the ending that I put together for her, I really wanted you to hear her own conflict. Like I could have made any ending for I could have chose something else. 2-hour interviews. There's a lot of different directions to go. But what I wanted is for you to hear that she was confused, and she was admitting that to herself. But she was also like, but I'm also making this shirt, or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. Okay.
well, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
The brother in the back.
What's your name?
Carl.
Carl.
Great film. It's the first time seeing it. I do have a question. If you were to do Afropunk today, 20 years later, given the fact that we have social media and we have access to things that probably wasn't prevalent back in 2003, do you think the characters would be espousing the same things that they did in this film, or would be slightly different?
The difference is that right off the top, I can tell you there would be a lot younger people. I think the youngest person was 15, but there wasn't a lot of teenagers. And that was simply because of who had access to the internet in 2001, So I think that it would be, I would be able to get more representation, I did my best at the time to represent women, men, queer. I'm sure that there would probably be more intersectional conversation around gender or whatever, I feel like that's a topic that wasn't really, we were able to be a little bit more focused. And I don't think that's a good thing, but it's just, how we talked about issues back then. And then also, like I said, in the 80s and 90s, the scene, I feel like the Black members of bands were kind of like, I'm here, but like, you don't have to, like, I'm not here, like the person I'm Black, I'm here, I'm Black, but I'm not here to be Black, right? Now I think there's a whole wave of like, I'm here and I'm Black, fuck you, and some of the biggest bands in the scene, and maybe I'm biased, but like, maybe you can back me up, like, there's a band called Zulu that's like huge in the scene, all Black. They have a t-shirt that says abolish white hardcore. And they're like uncompromised. Like if you see their videos and you didn't have the music, you would maybe just think it was like they were like backpack hip hop kids or something, but they're like the heaviest hardcore band, Soul Glow is another one that's super huge. And, everyone in the band is Black except for the drummer. There's no band on earth that sounds like them. They're doing like bringing a whole new thing to it. So I think that there'd be an element of empowerment that I'd have to highlight. It feels like this film, I feel like it ends with like hope, but it's like hope, And I think now it's like, fuck yeah, we're doing it, And it feels like when I look at my Instagram feed, and granted, we all curate our own feeds, but I look at mine and I'm like, damn, it's hella Black and brown. Like the punk scene is super queer. Like it feels like I can completely comfortably exist with amazing bands and not have to listen to a single white guy. you know? And that's like, not that I have anything against white guys, but like, I've heard everything that they have to say, you know? Like, and that's the same for television or whatever. It's like, how are you going to tell me a new story, you know? But like, a queer story, a Pakistani story, just a story from a cisgendered woman. Like, it's just like, these are not stories we hear enough, and we are seeing them in the punk and hardcore scene now. You know, it's not like the days of Riot Girl, Bikini Kill, where people are like, threatening women on stage for just existing. I'm sure that happens, but like, those women paved the way so that these women today can just like kick ass, and so that really excites me, and I would definitely have to highlight that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I know Fishbone was big for you. Angela made a couple cameos in that movie. Did you?
Yeah, it's funny because if you
the vocalist for Fishbone.
Yeah, if you look at he actually only has one part, and it's just him saying, "Look at Bad Brains."
Right.
And it's like, that was for a couple of reasons. One was because when I interviewed them, it was one of my first interviews, and it was in the back of the Wetlands, which is this bar in New York. And they have, we were in their like green room or whatever, and they had like a refrigerator back there that was just like, so it's like, it was impossible to get clean audio because I'm just using like a boom mic or whatever. But I kind of love it because I made a promise to myself when I was editing that I was not going to give preference to people because they're like big or they're rock stars or whatever.
More established.
Yeah, like I put their name on the cover because that like will help sell the DVD or whatever. But like, the people who speak the most are not necessarily people who are in bands that are that popular.
Yeah, more like regional stuff.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm only like, if you said it and you said it right, I'm putting it in. So yeah, I kind of love that like one of the more famous people only gets one little moment.
A few seconds, yeah.
That felt like punker to me.
Yeah, I was wondering the intent or reason behind that.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have that shitty audio, I'm sure he said great things,
Yeah.
But it was what it was,
Well, that clears that up. What's giving you hope, or what's giving you concern today?
I think what I just said about like, when I talk about hope, if we're talking about this community and where we are today, I've always seen punk as like a smaller version, or like, one corner of the underground, and the underground is a reflection of the mainstream, like the mainstream is always trying to catch up. The things that we were talking about in the 90s are now being talked about in the mainstream, So, I mean, not even to toot my own horn, but I found a zine that I wrote in high school, and in it, I'm talking about the difference between sex and gender,
Wow.
And I remember reading, I just read it like a month ago, and I was like, wow, like this is advanced.
Yeah. Like, for the 90s especially.
Yeah, I still have a hard time explaining that to normies now,
Uh-huh.
So it's a cycle, and the mainstream is always trying to catch up to the underground, and I think the underground is really exciting to me right now,
Yeah.
So my hope is that the mainstream is going to catch up, and by that point we will be on to even more progressive things, and it's just that cycle will continue, and hopefully we do it before, while we still have a chance to live on this planet,
That would be ideal.
Especially for those of us who have kids,
Yeah.
I want to leave you guys with hope, because I do have hope when I look at what the kids are doing,
Yeah. So you're going back to Los Angeles tomorrow?
First thing.
Yeah.
Came up just for you guys.
That's sweet. Well,
I really appreciate you coming down.
well, we love you. We appreciate you. Give it up for Mr. Spooner.
Thank you.
Thanks again, James Spooner. His latest book is called Black Punk Now. It's an anthology from many different writers writing about the Black Punk experience. He's also got a graphic novel called The High Desert, and you can find his film Afro Punk online. This episode was recorded by Andrew Ebright at the Capitol Theater in downtown Olympia. The next episode of Low Profile features Laura Logic from the X-Ray Specs and Essential Logic. Hope to catch you next time.